Okay, we got our cells arrived in the mail, so let's look. Alright, we're down to the second box. I was a little confused there, the first one, because I opened it up expecting to have 4 cells, but there were only 2. So then we had to go back, check the order, and say, yeah, it's coming in 2. So we'll check this over. I already checked the box over. The box looks in great shape. I don't see any potential damage from the box anyway, so. I checked these too. So it comes with 2 bus bars and flange bolts. Alright, so now we got 4 cells here, and they all look in great shape. I don't see any dings on them at all, which is good. And if we test them with a multimeter here, 3.28, 3.28, 3.28, 3.28. So I'm building a box for the lithium cells here, and I guess a couple of reasons. One of the biggest one, I guess, is talking a little bit about compression. And again, I'm not an expert. This is kind of just based on research, but a couple different things about compression. A couple sources I researched talked about the thinness of the walls of the cells, and if they weren't really designed to be out on their own, they were designed to be actually in electric cars, kind of put in and contained. And so need to sort of build something, because they, in order to get as much lithium in there, or as much stuff in there to, you know, we get to with the limpets, a 10-pound limpets and a 5-pound sack, that the thin aluminum on the sides will allow them to bulge when they get to max capacity. Of course, the other side of the coin is you're not supposed to maybe charge them up to max capacity to protect the life of the cell. So, but either way, it seemed like a pretty good idea to have some sort of container to put them in and compress them a little bit. So I just, again, mostly just kind of scrapwood, get some plywood, cut some handles into it, drilled some holes enough, and I'll give you a top-down view so you can see it, enough space. I had some little plastic kicking around from the old skylights left over, and so we just kind of use those, because they talk about if they do rub, that they could rub through the aluminum on the sides of the cells. If they're compressed, I'm not sure how much they're going to rub, but it seemed like cheap insurance, since we had that, was the Lexon still kicking around. So I've got a piece cut in between each of the cells, and then on the threaded rod there, I put a piece of plastic tubing as well, just so that there's nothing that can possibly rub. And then we're just going to tighten this up. And I'm not going to go crazy tight with it, just enough to really kind of secure it in there. And then I will cut a bottom and put that on there. So I should put this over in the spot where I want it first. So the box is built. I'll probably add some things for like the battery management system and things like that, but it's good for now. And I actually might put some pieces like down in here just to keep the them from sliding. Although they're in there pretty tight. I don't know if they will, but time to move on to the top balancing phase. So one thing is why top balancing, or balancing, I guess you can bottom balance them too, but top balancing, or why balancing is important, is because when you, again, if we have on this chart here, if we have volts over here on the left and the state of charge on the bottom, And if you put a multimeter on at you know, when it's at 3.7 volts, you know, that's pretty much 100% state of charge. Once you drop down into, you know, I'm not sure exactly what the volts are in here aside, but at some point in lower voltage, you're going to be in this window. And one battery could be here at, you know, 95% or whatever, but the other battery could way down here at, just say, 70 or 80%. And so because you have this large gap, when the volt, you know, when you're charging your batteries and the battery management system, whatever, it perceives that this one battery over here is, oh, it's getting close, so it shuts down the charge. But this other battery that could have been way down here won't get charged up. And so you have this large gap, you know, 10-15% maybe of capacity that you're not going to be able to get out of your batteries. So you want to charge them up pretty high so that you know that they're all sort of in this window here, so that they're equal and that you can charge them all up to pretty much to the capacity you want. Okay, so I have connected all the positives together with one wire and all the negatives together with another wire. So kind of crisscross pattern. That way I can set them up to put them in series with the bus bars later on. But now I can put them in the box here, put them in the compression, and use sort of this parallel setup with the wires to charge them up to capacity. And so I've got the, I set my bench top at 365. It kind of dropped a little bit, I guess, but and we're running at 7 amps. And I guess from what I understand, this could take a couple days, a long time to charge it. Again, especially only pulling 7 amps into this, but I'm not in a hurry right now, so we'll come back and check on it later. Okay, while we're waiting for the battery's top balance, or the cell's top balance, I'm going to get our BMS ready. And so I got this 150 amp BMS. It's got a Bluetooth connection, which is nice. You can check balances just from your phone, and the thermostat and the power leads. And so I'm gonna crimp some connectors on the end. So I've got some connectors here, ring connectors. Actually, I found these kind of challenging to find because you need rings that are big enough to go over the battery terminals. But this gauge, you know, looks like, you know, 20 gauge wire. So, you know, the gauge small enough to actually hook onto the wire. And then I guess the other challenge is I really kind of like the shrink wrap ones to go with the crimp. And again, couldn't find ring connectors of this gauge that had the shrink wrap already on. So I have some my container of shrink wrap. So let's we'll strip the ends of each one of the wires. They get this little tiny little end, but I don't think that's enough. So we'll just Right, we're about 48 hours in here, and we are at a little bit of slippage here. This has dropped down from 365 to 356, so what I may do is disconnect them, turn that back up in a little bit, and then reconnect them again. But we've dropped, it was 7.5 amps when we first started, so we've dropped down to 4.5, so it's getting closer to being fully charged. So we'll keep an eye on it. Probably will turn it up a little bit. Probably not now. Well, maybe I will. I don't know. But from what I understand, we don't want to actually adjust the amperage while it's connected. So disconnect it, then turn it back up, put it back on. But we're getting closer. Okay, so we're at almost 6 days. So we started put this on the charger on Sunday night, and it's now Saturday morning about 10 o'clock. So it's been going a while, and we sort of drifted down. And I noticed this our bolts would sometimes it would drift a little bit down and up. So I would disconnect it, make minimal adjustments, and connect it back up. But we're down to now under 1 amp flowing in there, so we're getting pretty close. If I put the multimeter on it, we're getting 3.55, 3.55, 3.56. As we get closer up here, you know, of course we're still on the charge, but 3.57. So I'm going to let this drop down just a little tiny bit more, and then I'll take everything off the power and probably just let it sit for a couple hours and let it rest a little bit, and then I'll double check the voltage out of each one of them, and we'll hook up the BMS. Do a quick test here. We are at 3.6, 3.6, 3.6, 3.6. Good. I would say that they are top balanced. Okay, we're going to set up the battery management system, and again we've got them set up here to run in series. So we have positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, and then positive, negative. So to run these in series, we've got the bus bars. I'm going to drop those on from positive and negative, positive to negative, and positive to negative. So I'm going to set up the balance leads, and the directions aren't super clear, so I had to sort of play with this a little bit to make sure that I got it right. Now I'm pretty sure I do. So the first black line goes on the first battery, negative. And then just going in order, the second one goes still on the first battery, positive. I'll just sort of put these nuts on just briefly to start, just to hold them in place. And each wire in order goes to the positive of the next battery in series. So there's the next one, and this goes to the positive, which is here. And so on. So to double check that everything's set up correctly before you plug this clip into the BMS, check each one of the connections. So under the negative wire, I'm going to put the negative probe in that connection there. Kind of tricky to hold on to. And test each wire. They should kind of go up by a little bit. So this first one should be around 3 volts. Yep, 3.5. The next one should be around 7. Yep, 7.10. Next one should be around 10. Yep, 10.67. And the last one should be over 14. And we got 14.24. So yeah, so we got 14 volts coming out of the whole battery pack. So that part is correct. Good. Next, it says hooked up the Bluetooth wire. You know, make sure that the thermometer part is hooked in. So that is, and then we'll hook in the Bluetooth. And then it says hook up our B minus. Now this is, again, what you get with these type of directions. So it gives us a warning at the beginning. Special attention, the cables of different manufacturers are not universal. Please ensure that the VNS-ZNR sampling balance cables are used. The colors of the B minus and the P minus from different manufacturers are different. Please pay attention to the B minus and the P minus marks. In the drawing here, I've got a B minus, which is, and this one is listed as black, but here the B minus is listed as blue, and B plus, which I don't have a B plus at all. This P minus actually goes off to the negative load, but it says to do one thing and the directions are kind of completely wrong, so I kind of have to figure it out, I guess. But it says, so the B minus is going to go to the first cell negative battery. That, and it says once that is done, then hook up this last plug here. And we should be all hooked up, and we can move on to setting up the Bluetooth and setting up the parameters there. Everything's hooked up. I'm going to tighten up all the bolts here, and looking at different specs, should some disagreement I guess out there, but for the most part it seems to be 6 Newton meters or 53 inch-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set up, and we'll tighten these all up. Okay, so I built a little frame with my Craig jig, screwed it into the sides of the battery box, screwed some cross members in, and then put some tiny screws in to hold the BMS there. I'll get some zip ties and tidy that a little bit up. I can't find my zip ties. Must be kicking around somewhere. I probably put them in a secret spot. But anyway, I'll do that. So, and then yeah, set everything up on the app, and I'll show you how to do that, and or how I did it anyway. And that's it. I guess it's about ready to install. Okay, so we got the batteries hooked up, and so now I'm going to just go over the sort of settings I put onto the app on your phone. It's sort of battery monitoring system. So so kind of hit this. I got the batteries in the series setting. So we sort of hit this, and then this is the BMS Bluetooth. So we're kind of set up on this screen. We can see that the battery capacity here at the top and the different settings across the bottom here. So let's kind of go to some of the settings here. If we hit settings down here on the bottom, you can see where the cell volt high protect, and honestly I forgot what a lot of the default settings were, but so actually let's just scroll across here. So you have protection parameters, and you can kind of see the different things at the top. You get the cell characteristics, so you can go back and forth at the top, or you can just swipe over. Cell characteristics, again at the top it's a LiFePo battery. The board settings, I didn't really mess with those at all. Temperature protection, I had to adjust a couple things on this because it's just like the charged low temperature protect was well below freezing, so I reset that to a couple degrees above freezing. Everything else I think was okay. Actually it was super hot too, so I think it was even higher than that, so I turned that down a little bit. And then the system settings here. So let's go back and look at some of the settings here. The cell volt high protect, you can have this set higher if you want. Again, look at my research, and people suggested that not charging the battery so high was better for the health of the battery. This is 280 amp hours. We don't use a ton of power. Already I've had this been running in here for a week with like the inverter on, and I think I put the Starlink on just to sort of try to drain the batteries, and it's hardly come down at all after a week. So I decided that I'd rather have long-term health care. Long-term, we need health care for everybody, not just batteries, but in my case the battery. And so what I decided to do is bring down the charge rate a little bit, and then also the low protect. I put rather than 2.5, I put 275. And yes, that's kind of reducing the capacity of the batteries, but since we don't need a ton of capacity, from my understanding, that actually helps the batteries last a lot longer. So I just made those choices there. And then I kind of changed down the volts with a high volt protect about 15. That might actually be a little bit high. I might turn that down. And then the rest of that I left pretty much the way it was set up. Charge overcurrent protect I put at 40 amps and then at 60 amps, just because I think that's the normal capacity of the battery, so what's going to come in anyway. So with the battery capacity, it says in the directions that to drain the batteries down a little bit and then recharge them, and then once they charge up and it goes into the automatic shutdown, then that will sort of recalibrate what the battery capacity is as far as percentage wise. So I haven't quite done that yet, so that's why it's still kind of reading at 50%. Hopefully when the battery does shut down, it'll recalibrate that, and we'll have more of an accurate aspect of what the battery capacity is. Although I suspect that it's going to be actually even more, because again, I throttled things back to sort of shut off at 3.35 volts, so or 3.4 volts, whatever it was. So probably have more capacity of the batteries should we decide to reset those and charge them a little bit higher, but I think it's going to be fine the way it is. So there's a video on building lithium phosphate. So there's our video on building a lithium iron phosphate battery. Already really happy with it. It's a major upgrade to the old lead acid battery that we had in here, which was fine for a couple years, but then once that battery died, it wasn't fine anymore. But I'm really excited about this one. I think it's going to be great for boondocking in our travels as we move forward. So again, hope it's helpful. Any comments, throw them down below, or questions. Be happy to hear from people's experiences or what questions about the process, and happy to have you along the ride. So like, subscribe, do all those things that you do, and look forward to seeing the next video. Thanks for watching.